أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رسولا ونبيا رب أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك رب أن يحضرون ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Continuing on with the Prophet ﷺ's legendary government military legacy, the era of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, his life and times. We're picking up from page number 220. This is video number 52 in his era. We have completed a total of 30 videos, the military legendary career of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, dating from the migration, the Madani migration that is, and it leads all the way to the last breath. Then the era of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is known as the legendary military legacy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, era of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, starting off with the appointment of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq being the Khalifa of the Muslimin. So again, a total of 50 videos before we have begin the series of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, now on page number 220. The Muslims all crossed the river safe and sound with no harm coming to anyone. No one fell in the river except a man from the tribe of Bariq who was called Ghada, who fell from the back of a Palomino horse. Al-Qaqa ibn Amr turned his horse around to go and help him, and he held on to his arm until he brought him across the river. The Bariqi, who was one of the toughest of men, said, "Sisters are no longer able to give birth to sons like you, O Qaqa." He was a maternal uncle of Al-Qaqa. The Persians were amazed when the Muslims crossed over the river, and Yazdigird fled, heading for Khulwan. The Muslims entered the city unopposed, and Saad stayed in the White Palace, which he took as a place of prayer, and recited the ayahs. How many of gardens and springs that they, the Fir'aun, have left behind, and green crops and goodly places and comforts of life wherein they used to take delight, as it is, or it was, and we made other people inherit them. Surah number 44, ayah number 25 to 28, and he prayed 8 rakahs, the prayer of victory. The first one to enter Al-Madain were the Ahwal squadron, then the Al-Kharsa squadron. The Ahwal squadron was left by Asim ibn Amr at-Tamimi, and Al-Kharsa squadron was led by Qaqa ibn Amr at-Tamimi. 2.6.6 examples of the Muslims' honesty. I praise Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, and I am content with his reward. I am content with his reward, When the Muslims arrived in Al-Madain and gathered their plunder, a man came with something which he gave to the one who was in charge of the plunder. He and the one who was with him said, "We have never seen anything like this. We have never gotten anything like this, or anything that even comes close." They asked, "Did you take anything from it?" He said, "By Allah, were it not for Allah, we would not have brought it to you." They realized that this man was of good caliber and said, "Who are you?" He said, "No, by Allah, I will not tell you, lest you or anyone else praise me, but I praise Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, and I am content with his reward." A man followed him until he went back to his companions. Then he asked about him and found out that he was Amir ibn Abd Qais. Asma ibn al-Harith ad-Dabdi said, "I went out with those who went out seeking booty, and I followed a well traveled path where I saw a man on a donkey. He ran away and caught up with another man who was in front of him. They turned and ran with their donkeys until they came to a river where the bridge was broken. They stayed there until I caught up with them. Then they parted. One of them threw something at me, so I chased him and killed him, and the other one ran away. I went back to the two donkeys and brought them to the one who was collecting the plunder. He looked at what the first one was carrying, and there were two saddle bags. In one was a horse made of gold with a saddle of gold and a bridle of rubies and emeralds set in silver and rings of similar fashion. And there was a knight made of silver stud with jewels. In the other bag there was a camel of silver and on which was a saddle of gold and reins of gold. All of that was adorned with rubies, and on it was a man made of gold, studded with gems. Khosrow used to keep them in the columns in his palace, on which their history was engraved. The goodness of Al-Qaqa ibn Asim. Al-Qaqa caught up with a Persian and killed him. He had with him 2 boxes and 2 bags. In one of the 2 boxes there were 5 swords, and in the other one was 6. These were the swords of the Persians and the kings with whom the Persians had fought wars. Among them there was a sword of Khosrow and the sword of Heraclius. In the 2 bags were some shields that had belonged to kings, including the shield of Khosrow and the shield of Heraclius. He brought them to Sa'd, who said, "Choose one of these swords." So he chose the sword of Heraclius, and he gave him the shield of Bahram. The rest of them he gave to the Al-Khazsa squadron, which was led by Al-Qaqa, except for the swords of Khosrow and Numan, which he decided to send to Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, so that the Arabs would hear about that, because they knew of these 2 men. The Sahabas praised the numbers or the members of the army. The senior Sahaba praised that army, as when Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas said, "By Allah, this army is honest. Were it not that the virtue of people of the Badr is already established, I would have said that they were better than the people of Badr." Jabir ibn Abdullah said, "By Allah, besides whom there is no other God, we have not seen anyone among the people of Al-Qadisiyah who prefers this world over the hereafter. We were suspicious about 3 men, then we realized that we were wrong, when we saw that their honesty and asceticism were unmatchable. They were Tulayha ibn Khawalid, Amr ibn Ma'di, Yakrib, and Qais ibn al-Maqshu'. Greater than that was the praise of the Caliph Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu himself, when he saw the khums from the booty, among which were the sword, belt, and adornments of Khosrow. He said, "The people who sent this are indeed honest." Ali radiyallahu anhu said, "You were honest, so the people were honest as well. Had you been dishonest, they would have been dishonest." Following the battle of Al-Qadisiyah, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas sent the cloak, sword, belt, bracelets, pants, shirt, crown, and slippers of Khosrow to Umar. These were made of fine and expensive materials such as silk, gold, and jewels. Umar looked at the people, and the tallest and most well-built of them was Suraqa ibn Malik ibn Jatham. He said, "O Suraqa, stand up and put this on." Suraqa said, "I was hoping to keep." Suraqa said, "I was hoping to keep it, so I got up and I put it on." Umar said, "Walk over there." So he walked. Then he said, "Come back." So he came back. Then he said, "Good. A Bedouin from Madlaj, wearing the cloak, pants, sword, belt, crown, and slippers of Khosrow. What a day, O Suraqa, when You are wearing the clothes of Khosras and his family. What a great honor for you and your people. Take them off. So he took them off, and Umar said, O Allah, you withheld this from your messenger and prophet, who was dearer to you than me and more honored by you than me, and withheld it from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, who was dearer to you than me and more honored by you than me, and you have given it to me. I seek refuge in you, lest you have given it to me in order to test me. Then he wept until those who were with him felt sorry for him. Then he said to Abdurrahman ibn Auf, I urge you to sell it and divide it before evening comes. SubhanAllah. 2.7 The Battle of Jalulah. The Persians gathered at the crossroads where routes to defend cities met in Jalulah. They started complaining to one another and said, if you separate, you will never be united. This is the place from which we are going to depart. Let us unite against the Arabs and fight them. If we win, then this is what we want. If the outcome is otherwise, then we will have done our best. So they united under the leadership of Mahran Arazi. They dug a ditch around their city and surrounded it with wooden spikes, except for the routes that they used to use. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu wrote to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, informing him of that fact, and Umar wrote back ordering Sa'd to send Hashim ibn Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas to Jalulah with 12,000 men, putting Al-Qaqa ibn Amr at-Tamimi in charge of the vanguard, Mas'ar ibn Malik in charge of the right flank, and Amr ibn Malik ibn Utbah in charge of the left flanks, and Umar ibn Murrah al-Juhani in charge of the rear guard. Hashim went to them with his army and besieged them. The Persians held out for a long time, only coming out to them when they wanted to, and they engaged the Muslims in 80 skirmishes. But Allah Jalla Jalaluhu gave the Muslims the upper hand, and they defeated the Mushrikeen, driving them onto the wooden spikes that they had set up to prevent the Muslims from advancing. Then the enemy prepared spikes of iron. Sa'd started sending horsemen as reinforcements. When the situation had gone on too long and the Persians were suffering because of the Muslims' patience, they decided to attack, so they came out to fight. Sa'd said, strive your utmost for the sake of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, so that you might attain, the fullest reward of booty. Strive for the sake of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. They met and fought, and Allah sent against them a wind that made everything turn dark, so they had no choice but to stop fighting and retreat. The horses started falling in the ditch, and they had no choice but to fill in part of the ditch that was the nearest to them, so that the horses could climb out. Thus they spoiled their own fortifications. When the Muslims heard that the enemy had filled in part of the ditch, they said, let us charge at them again, so that we may enter upon them, or else die trying. When the Muslims attacked again, they lay iron spikes down around the ditch, so that the horses would not advance towards them, and they left a space where they could come out and attack the Muslims. They fought fiercely, a battle the like of which they had not fought except on the night of Al-Harir, during the campaign of Al-Qadisiyah. But it was a shorter and quicker battle. Al-Qaqa ibn Amr ended up at the gate near the place where the ditch had been filled in. So he seized the gate and ordered someone to cry out, O Muslimin, your commander has entered the ditch of the people and seized it. Come to him, and do not let those who are between you and him prevent you from entering it. He issued this command in order to strengthen the Muslimin. So the Muslims attacked, and they were in no doubt that Hashim was there. No one could stop them until they reached the gate by the ditch, where they found Al-Qaqa ibn Amr had seized it, and the Mushrikeen had started to flee right and left from the gate where their ditch was. They died in a tactical prepared by the Muslimin, losing their heroes to the iron spikes that they had prepared for the Muslims and ending up as foot soldiers. The Muslims pursued them, not sparing any but the most insignificant of them. On that day, Allah killed 100,000 of them, and the ground was strewn with the bodies of the slain. Allahu Akbar. 2.7.1 Our army made us talk because of their deeds. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas sent Ziyad ibn Ubayd with the financial account to Umar. Ziyad was the one who kept records of the troops. When he came to Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, he spoke to him about what he had brought and described it to him. Umar said, "Can you stand up and tell the people what you have told me?" He stood up and told the people of the victories they had won, and what they had done, and how they had penetrated deeply into the enemy's land. Umar said, "This is an eloquent speaker." Ziyad said, "Our army made us talk because of their deeds." Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Umar's attitude concerning the booty of Jalulah. The battle of Jalulah ended up in victory for the Muslims, and they collected a huge amount of booty. They sent the khums to Umar, who said when he saw it, "By Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, they should not be kept under any roof until I divide it." Abdurrahman ibn Auf and Abdullah ibn Arqam spent the night guarding it in the courtyard of the masjid. The following morning, Umar came with the people and took the covers of the booty off. When he saw the rubies, emeralds, and jewels, he wept. Abdurrahman ibn Auf said to him, "Why are you weeping, O Amir al-Mu'mineen? By Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, this is a time for giving thanks." Umar said, "By Allah, that is not why I am weeping, but Allah never gives this to a people, but they start to envy one another and hate one another. And if they start to envy one another, that will cause enmity and division among them." That this is a kind of intuition that is based on faith. For the believer who has deep faith sees the consequences of what is happening in such a way that never even crosses the mind of anyone else other than Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. His fear for the believers, lest they be affected by worldly matters in such a way that they become alienated from one another, has a great impact on him and makes his tears flow in front of people. It is amazing that the tears would flow from a man who had achieved such a power that all people feared him, Muslims, Kafirs, and hypocrites alike. But this is the compassion with which Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has adorned the hearts of the believers, so that they become as Allah Jalla Jalaluhu described them. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are severe against disbelievers and merciful amongst themselves. You see them bowing and falling down in prostration, praying, seeking bounty from Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. The mark of them, of their faith, is on their faces, foreheads, from the traces of prostration during prayer. This is their description in the Torah, but their description in the Gospel, the Injil, is like a sown seed which sends forth its shoot, then makes it strong, sends forth its root, and then makes it strong and thick, and it stands straight on its stem, delighting the souls, that he may enrage the disbelievers with them. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has promised those among them who believe in all of those who follow monotheism of Al-Islam, the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the last day, and they do the righteous deeds, not just say forgiveness and a mighty reward, Jannah. Quran, Surah number 48, Ayah number 29. The conquest of Ram Hormuz. The Persians had started to regroup yet again at an incitement of their king Yazdagir. They gathered in Ram Hormuz under the leadership of Al-Hormuzan. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas informed the Caliph of the gathering, and he ordered him to prepare an army from the people of Kufa under the leadership of Nu'man ibn Maqram. He also ordered Abu Musa al-Ash'ari to prepare an army from Basra under the leadership of Sahl ibn Adi. When the two armies met, Abu Sabra ibn Abi Ruhan Ruhm was to assure leadership of both, and everyone who came to him would be counted as reinforcements for him. And Nu'man ibn Maqram set out with the people from Kufa and headed to meet Al-Hormuzan, who was in Ram Hormuz. When Al-Hormuzan heard that An-Nu'man was heading his way, he wanted to attack, hoping to isolate An-Nu'man with the support of the Persians who had joined him. An-Nu'man and Al-Hormuzan met in Arbaq, where they fought intensively. Allah caused An-Nu'man to defeat Al-Hormuzan, who evacuated Ram Hormuz and fled to Tastar. Meanwhile, Sahl ibn Adi came with the people of Basra heading for Ram Hormuz. News of the battle reached them in Suq al-Ahwaz, and they heard of Al-Hormuzan had run away to Tastar, so they headed for Tastar, as did An-Nu'man with the troops from Kufa. The conquest of Tastar 2.9. The army of Nu'man ibn Maqram and the army of Sahl ibn Adi reached Tastar, where they united under the leadership of Abu Sabr ibn Abi Ruhm. Abu Sabr asked Umar for reinforcements, and he sent Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, who became the leader of the army from Basra, and Abu Sabrah carried on as commander of the entire army. The Muslims besieged Tastar for several months, during which they faced the enemy in 8 battles. The heroism of the champions became apparent in single combat, and several of them became famous for killing 100 in a single combat. Apart from those who they killed during the battles themselves, among them were Al-Bara ibn Malik, Majza ibn Thawr, Ka'b ibn Sur, and Abu Tamima from among the people of Basra. Among the people of Kufra were Habib ibn Qura, Rabai ibn Amir, and Amir ibn Abdullah al-Aswad. During the final battle, the Muslims met the enemies and the fighting grew intense. The Muslims called out to Al-Bara ibn Malik, saying, "O Bara, urge your Lord to defeat them for us." He said, "O Allah, defeat them for us and make me a martyr." Then the Muslims continued fighting and defeated their enemy, forcing them to cross their own trenches and pursuing them. When the going got too tough for the Persians and they could no longer bear the siege, 2 of them made contact with Muslims independently of one another and told them that the way to conquer the city was through the place where water came out. The news reached An-Nu'man ibn Maqram, and he urged his companions to do something. The heroes of the armies of Kufra and Basra met in that place at night and entered the city thereby. Then they said takbir, and those who were on the outside also said takbir. They opened the gates and destroyed the troops who had been guarding them after a little resistance. During this battle, Al-Bara ibn Malik and Majza ibn Thawr were martyred when they were shot by Al-Hormuzan. Their martyrdom came after the Muslims had won the battle and Al-Hormuzan, the Persian commander, had fled to a citadel. The Muslims who had entered through the waterway encircled the citadel, and when they saw him, they rushed towards him. But he said to them, "What do you want? You may think that I am concerned, but I have in my quiver 100 arrows, and by Allah, you will never be able to reach me so long as I have 1 arrow left, and not 1 arrow will miss its target. What is the point of taking me captive if I give you 100 casualties, dead or wounded?" They asked, "What do you want?" He said, "I want to put my hand in your hand and go to Umar, and he can do whatever he wants with me." They said, "We grant you that." So he threw down his quiver and let them take control of him. They put him in chains and kept an eye on him and sent him to the Khalifa Umar bin al-Khattab. Then they took everything that was in the city of wealth and stored goods, of which they shared out 4/5, giving each horseman 3,000 dirham and each foot soldier 1,000. Inshallah, we will stop here on page number 230 at the bottom of the page, and pick it up there on video number 53. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسم ربك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون، سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.